Hello everyone, I would like to welcome you all to Group 17's presentation. Let's see if you can guess the country by this information. Every year around 1 million Australians go island hopping, snorkeling or sightseeing in this country, making it the second most popular holiday destination after New Zealand. Yes, our group's assigned country was Indonesia, a country with interesting history, demographics, culture, value orientations, media, education, business, and interpersonal communication habits. So we're going to present our findings today and relate every aspect of the country to communication and contrast it with Georgia, where comparisons are appropriate. Starting with myself, I'm going to talk about the history of this hulking tropical archipelago, brimming with volcanoes, rainforests, marvelous creatures, and interesting people. The earliest human remains, the remains of Homo sapiens on the islands, is dated to 43,000 BC, which is consistent with the general migration pattern out of Africa of Homo sapiens. The first recognizable trace of a country in the area was the Sriwijaya kingdom in the 7th century CE. At roughly the same time on Java, the largest of the Indonesian islands, Mendang kingdom was taking shape. They built Borobudur, world's largest Buddhist temple in the early 9th century, according to Taylor and John Goldman. After this, a Hindu Sanjaya dynasty followed and built Indonesia's largest Hindu temple, the Prambanan. This period is often referred to as a golden age, which was promptly ended by the eruption of Mount Merapi in the early 900 CE. After a recovery period of roughly 300 years, Indonesian kingdoms were starting to gain their power. But of course, this was halted by the invasion of the Mongols. Using this invasion, Raden Rujia sided with the Mongols, ascended to the throne, and then promptly drove them out. He then went on to establish Majapahit Empire, a majestic mercantile power. Trade was very active during this period, and thus this period sees the spread of Islam in the previously Hindu empire. Today, Islam is the dominant religion on the islands. With the arrival of the 1500s, European nations entered the picture. This was the time of expansion for the great powers of Europe, so naturally they were drawn to Indonesia, as the region was rich with natural woods and spices, Europe's main interest at the time. During this time, we see entrance of the Dutch East India Company by the early 1600s wrestled the Portuguese out of Indonesia. After this, the Dutch got down to business, setting up working camps and generally sucking dry the rich Indonesian islands. They also imported Chinese workers to work the sugar mills, as sugar was the most profitable business at the time. Inevitably, the Chinese workers revolted in 1740 because of the unbearable conditions that the Dutch set up for them, and in the process killed 50 Dutch soldiers. Because of this, the Dutch started rumors that the Chinese were planning a large-scale revolution, and these rumors resulted in the Batavia massacre in 1740, where some 10,000 Chinese workers were butchered, under the command of Governor Valkenier, who was then arrested and died in prison. So the unchecked Dutch rule continued. Then World War II brought a huge change. Japan invaded Indonesia in 1942, and the Indonesians welcomed them as saviors from the Dutch. But after realizing that they had the same colonial interests as the Dutch themselves, riots promptly followed. After the Japanese surrendered in 1945, Indonesia declared independence under the leadership of Socialist Party led by Sukarno. Even though most of the world recognized Indonesia as independent, the Dutch still tried to hold on, and after 4 years of political and armed struggle, in 1949, Indonesia was finally free. But as Sukarno showed clear communist tendencies in 1965, there was a military coup, resulting in a vicious purge of Sukarno's supporters. After 2 years and over 500,000 casualties, Sukarno was overthrown, and General Suharto assumed power as a military dictator. These atrocities were supported by most of the Western countries out of fear of communism spreading, and thus Indonesia finally fully formed. With the support from Western nations, Indonesia began to thrive. After 3 decades of being in power, Suharto finally resigned in 1997 after the Asian financial crisis decimated the country's economy. And since 1999, Indonesia has a multi-party system. In the years after, Indonesia enjoyed steady financial growth and today has achieved a high level of human development and is the world's 16th biggest economy.
Indonesia is an amazingly interesting country in many respects, and one such as its demographics. Its population is 30.51% of the world's population, which according to the latest data is more than 2 million people. Such a large population is due to all the hundreds of different ethnic groups and cultures represented in Indonesia. It is to be mentioned that the young population makes up a fairly large part of the country's population. They are most powerful component of demographics that contributes to economic stability and development according to the Statista Research Department 2021. When we are talking about demographic components, annual income is also significant. Annual income, there is approximately 10,089 US dollars. What about religious diversity? 6 religions are accepted constitutionally and officially. Given that Indonesia is characterized by a fairly high population, the government is trying to encourage families to have fewer children.
Researchers Flores Klakos and Fred Stockman's studies were extended by social psychologist Geek Hofstede, whose works are nowadays known as Hofstede value orientation. And in this subsection, I'm going to talk about culture analysis using Hofstede value orientation. The first thing is feminine versus masculinity, and in the Hofstede insights, we can read Indonesia scores 46 on this dimension and is thus considered low masculine. Indonesia is not like the North European countries who are considered feminine. However, in Asia, it had the lowest score. And we can see that Georgia has 55 points, which means that none of the dimensions dominate. The second thing is low uncertainty avoidance versus high uncertainty avoidance. And here we can see that with a score of 48, Indonesia low desire of avoiding uncertainty, which can be explained by Javanese culture, which separates external and internal self from each other. While Georgia is radically different with 85 points as a nation, they have a lever to avoid any kinds of ambiguity. Unconventional behavior, advice, or ideas are not tolerated by Georgian people. The last thing is collectivism versus individualism, and here we can see that based on the numbers and research, Indonesia with the 0.40 from 100 is a collectivist society, which means that their lifestyle is strongly attached and confirms the best ideas. For example, if someone wants to marry, he has to go into the woman's family and introduce himself. And the same example is connected to Georgian culture too, and with the point of 41, it's also considered as collectivistic culture. In the past, Georgians were famous for their hospitality, and that's why they love working in groups and respect each other. From that time, people connected to each other and never gave each other a chance to get apart.
Countries are known for their political stance, economic independence, influence that they have on other countries, but the vital part that makes them dissimilar is culture. In the previous subchapter, Indonesian culture was analyzed by using Hofstade's value orientation. In this subchapter, we will use Klakol and Schrodek's value orientation to deeply understand the habits and beliefs of Indonesian society. In order to analyze the culture, the first question that should be asked is how the relationships between humans look like. As we already know, there are more than 1,000 ethnic and religious groups in Indonesia. On the other hand, this key factor does not affect Indonesians being group-oriented. They have developed their own etiquette that enables having communication in a respectful and indirect manner. Most common gesture is to ask for something before taking the action, which once more emphasizes the politeness of the society. Even though locals differ in their ethnicity and religion, most of them share the same principles of living a life. The second question that should be asked is what sort of human nature they possess. Almost 85% of Indonesian society belongs to Muslim groups. People who accept Islam should accept the reality since it is structured by their God. Indonesians who believe in this pattern of religion are known as people who seek spiritual relief. On the other hand, Indonesia is one of the fewest countries that keep the death penalty in their legislation. So considering all the factors that combine the culture as a whole, human nature can be considered as a mixture of good and evil. The third question that will help us find out social stance and perception about life is how they are oriented on time. Indonesian people have been group-oriented for a long time and have been focused on future plans rather than taking satisfaction with the present day. According to Mrs. Seomding, nowadays the phrase that is most commonly used is quick but sure, and the sooner the better. Culture modification has led the society to change the lifestyle, and nowadays it is obvious that they seem more present-day oriented. To sum up, using Klakol and Schrodek's value orientations, the mixture of good and evil human nature is part of Indonesian society, and their culture, especially during the last decades, has become group and present-day oriented.
Let's continue. Tiga Dara, Three Sisters, is one of the exceptional Indonesian movies of the 20th century. It clearly emphasizes and underlines the social, cultural backgrounds of 20th century Indonesian society. The movie's central focus is on women's rights and their ways of living. Tiga Dara was a major step in the reflection and reconsideration of women's rights in Indonesia. The movie's concept also touched upon the topic of folk culture, the ways in which the society used to live, and the effects of traditions on it. Considering all above mentioned, Tiga Dara is an exceptionally well-known and engaging way. It questions the male-centric culture which overwhelmed the 1950s. According to Carl Haider from the book Indonesian Cinema, Usmar Ismail, known as the father of Indonesian cinema, fundamentally raises issues with respect to ladies, freedom, their economic well-being, and marriage. This has also affected multiple aspects of the social formation progress, which is the main reason why the issue got critical by that time. Tiga Dara is a perfect example of how significant cultural tradition can affect society.
One of the artifacts I analyzed for deeper cultural understanding of Indonesia is the Nirlaba music video by Indonesian music band Lomba Sihir. So in the music video, we see that the scenes of several politicians. They are depicted as little children. They are in their offices. They are playing Monopoly, doing nothing, chatting with someone else, and in the end, they are violently trying to deassemble the performance of the band itself. Lombasi hears through that obviously wanted to show us how they feel that the current government is inadequate in their eyes. According to transparency.org, the Corruption Perception Index 2021, Indonesia is placed on 102nd out of 180 countries, which makes it one of the most corrupted countries in the world. And from other sources, we read about the current events about how government tried to restrict the freedom of the media. So the music video itself doesn't seem very far from the reality. The appearance of the little girl in red, which also represents a politician, is very momentous. She mostly stands behind the guy's back. She is whispering her ideas into the ears of the boy rather than expressing it herself. This conveys a very important idea about the unbalanced power dynamic between women and men in Indonesia. According to Charthouse.org, Indonesia was ranked second in terms of women violence in Pacific East. Young girl marriage is also very prevalent in some areas. And as we realize, Indonesia seems to be more patriarchal country, with feminism still has to go a long way. Symbolism. Now, moving on to the symbolism itself, the fact that the politicians are depicted as children serves as a criticism against cynicism, or maybe it also wants to show how the band thinks that the government is immature for their job, for the job positions that they hold. They are unable to serve the people. The presence of the video itself serves a very strange contradiction against the main Indonesian collectivistic value. Indonesian people are known to be collectivistic. They love and value peace and harmony, and they will avoid conflict and strife as much as possible, not only with each other as people, but also with authority. And the whole essence of the music video is to express a riot and disagreement with the Indonesian government and the political structure. So this video definitely very well creates a contrast with the main general value of the culture of Indonesia.
In this section, we will discuss 4 parts of the Indonesian education system, and we compare them to Georgian ones. The pre-primary level includes playgrounds and kindergartens. For both countries, they are not mandatory. Kids develop cognitive and non-cognitive skills. They are almost identical. Next is primary level. For both cases, it includes grades from 1 to 6, and it is mandatory. What about differences? In Indonesia, final exams are mandatory for next level, but in Georgia, it's not. The lower secondary in Indonesia, as well as in Georgia, includes grades from 7 to 9 and other various additional science classes. The only difference is that school-based exams have been deprioritized in Georgia. The junior upper secondary includes 10 to 12 grades. It's not mandatory. The difference between these two countries is the final exams for 12th grade exams in Georgia have been cancelled. The students in Indonesia as well as in Georgia have the opportunity to get higher education in both public and private universities. Public universities enjoy a greater reputation in the world market than private ones in these countries. So it is their similarity.
Now let's speak about major businesses in Indonesia and Georgia. In case of Indonesia, it's agriculture, oil and gas manufacturing, mining, trade, hotel and restaurants. In Georgia, it's oil and gas magnates, agriculture, tourism, restaurants, railways, and telecommunications. The similar businesses are oil and gas magnates, agriculture, and restaurants. Now let's compare Indonesian and Georgian interpersonal communications. Indonesians shake hands, but they do not shake left hand. They greet each other with selamat, which means peace. They do not cross their legs while sitting. They point with thumb, not with an index finger. They do not touch a head while a spirit is placed in the head. They rarely say no, but Georgians sometimes say no. They avoid prolonged eye contact. Sometimes Georgians do that. And like Georgians, they sometimes lower their tone while speaking. In today's presentation, we discussed about historical backgrounds, country demographics, value orientations, media analysis, education, businesses, and interpersonal communications. Indonesia deserves to be one of your holiday destinations. Definitely visit it. Thanks for your attention.